Hello everyone and welcome to my channel Y&R Trends. The moment Phyllis Summers wrapped her arms around Matt in the center of the dimly lit athletic club lounge, Genoa City itself seemed to inhale and hold its breath, because nothing about that embrace was accidental, tender, or forgiving. It was calculated, dangerous, and laced with the kind of venom only Phyllis could weaponize when she decided to burn down an enemy from the inside out, and as her cheek pressed against Matt's shoulder, her fingers tightening just enough to feel the tension ripple through his body, her eyes flicked over his shoulder and locked onto Lily Winters across the room, whose smile froze mid-conversation as confusion gave way to a sharp, gut-level instinct that something had just gone horribly wrong. Lily had spent weeks believing she was 10 steps ahead, believing Matt was her pawn, her secret leverage in a game designed to humiliate Phyllis once and for all, but she hadn't counted on Phyllis doing what Phyllis always did best, turning vulnerability into a weapon and affection into a trap. Because this wasn't a reconciliation, it wasn't forgiveness, and it certainly wasn't love, it was bait. And Lily, despite her intelligence and poise, felt the first icy prick of realization crawl up her spine as Phyllis laughed softly, a sound that carried just enough warmth to sell the illusion while her whispered words to Matt promised safety, alliance, and a future rewritten in blood-red ink. Matt, already drowning in guilt and fear, mistook that embrace for salvation, believing that Phyllis, of all people, had chosen him over chaos, had chosen him over revenge, and as he clutched her back with desperate gratitude, he never saw how she angled her body just right so Lily could see everything, never noticed how Phyllis's lips curved into a knowing smile that said she had already won, because Lily's trap, months in the making, meticulously designed to isolate Phyllis, frame her, and destroy her credibility, was now snapping shut on its creator instead. Lily's mind raced as memories collided, every suspicious text, every carefully planted rumor, every anonymous tip she had orchestrated suddenly rearranging themselves into a pattern she no longer controlled, and the deadly irony was that the more she tried to maintain composure, the more her silence screamed guilt, because Phyllis, still clinging to Matt, turned just enough to let Lily see the flash drive in her hand, the one containing proof Lily thought was buried forever, evidence of falsified records, manipulated testimony, and a plan that went far beyond corporate sabotage and straight into criminal conspiracy. The room buzzed with unaware patrons, glasses clinking and laughter echoing, but for Lily it felt like the walls were closing in as she realized Phyllis wasn't exposing her yet. Not because she couldn't, but because she was waiting, savoring the slow suffocation, the way a predator toys with prey before the kill. And when Phyllis finally released Matt and stepped back, her hand lingering just long enough to make the moment feel intimate, she spoke loudly enough for Lily to hear, praising Matt's courage, his honesty, his decision to finally do the right thing. Words that sliced through Lily like glass because she knew exactly what Phyllis was doing, reframing Matt as a whistleblower, a victim, a man redeemed, while Lily was being positioned as the architect of destruction. Lily excused herself moments later, her heels striking the floor with forced confidence, but the second she was alone, panic surged because Phyllis hadn't just stolen Matt. She'd turned him into a living time bomb, one that would explode the second he spoke to the wrong person. And as Lily replayed every move she'd made, she understood too late that Phyllis had let her think she was winning, had fed her just enough fear and just enough arrogance to push her into overreach, and now the trap Lily had designed to destroy Phyllis was armed, aimed, and pointed directly at her own heart. Meanwhile, Phyllis watched Lily retreat, satisfaction blooming behind her composed exterior as she leaned in close to Matt once more, her voice dropping into something dangerously sincere as she told him he was safe now, that she had him, that together they were going to make things right. And Matt, trembling with relief, confessed everything, every conversation, every secret deal, every promise Lily had made and broken, each word another nail in Lily's coffin, each detail another layer of insurance for Phyllis, who catalogued it all with surgical precision. By the time Matt finished, Phyllis already had the endgame mapped out, because this wasn't just about revenge, it was about control, about reminding Genoa City that underestimating Phyllis Summers was a fatal mistake. And as night fell and the city lights flickered on, Lily sat alone in her car gripping the steering wheel, her reflection staring back like a stranger as the weight of her choices settled in, knowing that once Phyllis pulled the trigger, there would be no escaping the fallout, careers ruined, reputations shredded, and possibly prison bars waiting. And the cruelest part was that Lily couldn't even warn anyone without incriminating herself, couldn't confront Phyllis without confirming her guilt, making every path forward a dead end. Back inside, Phyllis finally allowed herself a private moment of triumph, her smile no longer hidden as she watched Matt walk away believing he had been saved, when, in truth, he had become both shield and sword. And as she lifted her glass in a silent toast to Lily's retreating silhouette, her eyes gleamed with the promise of chaos to come, because the trap was set, the players were in place, and when Genoa City woke up to the truth, it wouldn't be Lily who decided how this ended. It would be Phyllis standing in the wreckage, victorious, unapologetic, and utterly ruthless, as the shockwaves of that single embrace rippled outward, transforming a moment of apparent forgiveness into the opening move of a deadly game no one else even knew they were playing. The next chapter began not with an explosion but with silence, the kind that crawled under doors and pressed against chests, because after that embrace, after Phyllis Summers rewrote the board with one calculated act of intimacy, Genoa City slipped into a deceptive calm that only ever came before devastation, and Lily Winters felt it first, sitting alone in the dark of her penthouse as the city lights blinked like distant warning signals, her phone untouched on the table because every notification now felt like a threat, every vibration like the first knock of law enforcement or the whisper of a betrayal finally made public, and yet Phyllis did nothing, not immediately, which was precisely what made it unbearable, because Lily knew Phyllis's cruelty had never been impulsive. It was patient, artistic, and merciless, and as hours turned into days without a public reveal, Lily's confidence eroded, her thoughts looping back to that moment in the lounge when she saw the flash drive, when she saw the certainty in Phyllis's eyes, and when she realized too late that she had mistaken Phyllis's chaos for weakness. Meanwhile, Phyllis moved through Genoa City like a woman reborn, lighter, calmer, terrifyingly focused, her conversations measured, her smiles controlled because she was no longer reacting. She was orchestrating, pulling strings behind the scenes as Matt, now fully in her grasp, became the centerpiece of a narrative she was carefully crafting, one where he was the remorseful insider ready to confess, and Lily was the powerful executive who crossed lines she could never uncross, and every meeting Phyllis took, every casual coffee with old allies, every seemingly innocent lunch with people Lily trusted was another domino nudged into position. Matt, for his part, began unraveling under the pressure of his own conscience, calling Phyllis late at night, his voice shaking as he confessed fears that Lily would retaliate, that she would destroy him, that he had gone too far to turn back, and Phyllis soothed him with practiced empathy, assuring him that truth was armor, that she would protect him, all while subtly encouraging him to document everything, to forward messages, to record conversations just in case, turning his anxiety into evidence without him ever realizing how completely he had surrendered control. Lily sensed the shift as doors quietly closed, as meetings were postponed without explanation, as whispers followed her through corridors, where she once commanded respect, and she tried to fight back, reaching out to trusted confidants, but every attempt felt delayed, dulled, ineffective because Phyllis had already seeded doubt, had already framed Lily's panic as guilt, her urgency as desperation, and when Lily finally confronted Phyllis in person, demanding answers, demanding to know what she was planning, Phyllis met her with unnerving calm, denying nothing yet confirming nothing, her words soft and ambiguous, telling Lily she should focus on protecting herself because things had a way of coming out eventually, a statement that landed like a death sentence. As pressure mounted, Lily made the fatal mistake of acting alone, attempting to preempt the fallout by quietly shifting blame, altering timelines, and instructing associates to destroy records she thought no one else knew existed, not realizing that Matt, racked with guilt and bound by his belief in Phyllis, had already provided duplicates of everything, complete with timestamps and corroboration, turning Lily's last-ditch effort into the final piece Phyllis needed to prove intent. The trap closed the moment Phyllis decided it was time, when she leaked just enough information to force an internal investigation without revealing her hand, allowing Lily to publicly deny accusations that hadn't yet fully surfaced, locking herself into statements that would soon be proven false, and as the investigation escalated, Lily's world collapsed in slow motion, board members distancing themselves, legal counsel urging silence, allies advising damage control, while Phyllis stood back, watching with a mixture of satisfaction and something darker, because victory didn't erase the scars Lily had carved into her. It only validated the lengths she was willing to go to survive. Matt's formal testimony became the turning point, his voice cracking as he laid out the scheme, naming Lily not as a mastermind but as a manipulator who had exploited fear and ambition, and while some questioned his credibility, Phyllis's final move silenced them all when she released the flash drive. Not through the media but through legal channels, ensuring its authenticity and impact were undeniable. And when Lily was finally confronted with the full scope of the evidence, the deadly trap she had built snapped shut with brutal finality, leaving her exposed, isolated, and facing consequences she could no longer outrun. In the aftermath, Genoa City reeled, alliances shattered, loyalties redefined, and as Lily stood alone in the wreckage of her own making, she understood the cruel truth too late. Phyllis Summers hadn't just beaten her. She had taught her a lesson written in ruin, proving that in a city built on power and secrets, the most dangerous person was never the one screaming for justice, but the one who smiled, embraced you in public and waited patiently for you to destroy yourself. The next chapter unfolded like a slow-burning nightmare Lily Winters couldn't wake up from, because even as the investigation tightened its grip and the walls closed in, the most terrifying part wasn't what Phyllis Summers had already done. It was what she was still holding back, and Lily felt it in every unanswered call, every guarded glance, every meeting where conversation stopped the moment she entered the room, because Phyllis had mastered the art of absence, staying just visible enough to remind Lily she was there while letting paranoia do the real damage. And as Lily sat across from her attorneys listening to phrases like exposure, criminal liability, and irreversible fallout, she realized with a hollow ache that this was no longer a corporate scandal but a personal reckoning, one engineered with such precision that it felt intimate, almost surgical, as if Phyllis had mapped every fear Lily had ever confessed and turned them into pressure points. Meanwhile, Phyllis moved through Genoa City with eerie restraint, declining interviews, avoiding public commentary, allowing speculation to grow unchecked, because she understood that silence was louder than any accusation, and every rumor that spread without her confirmation only deepened Lily's isolation, while Matt, now under protective counsel, began to understand the magnitude of what he had unleashed. His nights plagued by guilt and dread as he replayed Lily's promises, her threats, her moments of false reassurance, and though he tried to reach out to her, driven by a desperate need for closure, every attempt failed, because Lily could no longer risk contact, couldn't afford a single conversation that might be recorded, misinterpreted, or weaponized. Lily's desperation peaked when she confronted Devon, searching for loyalty, for grounding, for someone to believe in her version of events, but even he hesitated. His silence more devastating than outright rejection, because doubt had crept in, seeded by evidence too damning to ignore. And Lily walked away from that conversation with the sickening realization that Phyllis hadn't just targeted her professionally, she had severed her emotionally, cutting her off from the relationships that once anchored her strength. As pressure escalated, Lily made one final attempt to regain control, orchestrating a private meeting with Phyllis under the guise of truce, a conversation meant to de-escalate, to negotiate, to salvage what little power remained. And when they finally sat across from each other in a quiet, neutral space, the air between them crackled with unspoken history, Phyllis calm and unreadable, Lily tense but defiant, and for a moment it seemed possible that this could end without total annihilation, until Lily, unable to contain her fear, asked the one question that betrayed everything. "How much more do you have?" And Phyllis smiled, not cruelly but knowingly, telling Lily that the real danger wasn't what she had already uncovered, but what Lily herself might still do to avoid consequences, because every move Lily made now would only add to the record. A statement that shattered any illusion of control and left Lily realizing she was no longer playing a game but existing inside a cage Phyllis had built around her. After that meeting, events accelerated with brutal inevitability, subpoenas issued, accounts frozen, associates questioned, and as Lily's name became synonymous with scandal, she watched her legacy crumble in real time, the weight of public judgment heavier than any legal consequence, because she knew that even if she survived this professionally, the trust she had lost would never fully return. Phyllis, observing from the sidelines, felt a complex mix of triumph and exhaustion, because revenge, once tasted, didn't fill the emptiness it promised to, and yet she couldn't stop now, couldn't undo what had already been set in motion, especially when Matt's cooperation deepened and new revelations emerged, implicating Lily in actions even she hadn't fully acknowledged to herself, and as those truths surfaced, Lily's internal conflict reached a breaking point, forcing her to confront not just Phyllis's manipulation but her own capacity for ruthlessness. The chapter reached its climax when Lily was formally removed from her position, the announcement brief and carefully worded, but devastating in its finality, and as she stood alone afterward, staring at the skyline she once ruled, she felt the crushing weight of inevitability settle in, understanding that Phyllis had never needed to destroy her outright, only to give her enough rope to do it herself. In the aftermath, Genoa City shifted again, alliances recalibrating, power vacuums forming, and Phyllis, finally alone with her thoughts, allowed herself a moment of reflection, knowing this war had changed her too, sharpening her instincts but hardening her heart. And as she looked ahead to what came next, one truth remained unshakable. This wasn't the end, because in Genoa City, survival was temporary, revenge was cyclical, and the echoes of one deadly embrace would continue to ripple outward, dragging everyone involved into consequences that no one, not even Phyllis Summers herself, could fully control. The fallout struck like a delayed explosion, because even after Lily Winters was stripped of her power and reputation, Genoa City refused to let the wound close, and in that raw, unstable silence Phyllis Summers finally stepped fully back into the light, watching from her penthouse window as Lily's name scrolled across news tickers and whispered through boardrooms like a cautionary tale. Knowing the victory felt colder than she'd imagined, yet still unable to deny the grim satisfaction curling in her chest, because Lily had underestimated her, had mistaken her rage for recklessness instead of strategy, and now the consequences were unavoidable. Lily, meanwhile, existed in survival mode, each day blurring into the next as she faced lawyers, investigators, and former allies who now spoke to her with rehearsed sympathy and guarded eyes. And the most devastating realization wasn't that she had lost everything, but that she could trace the exact moment it all went wrong back to that embrace. Phyllis's arms around Matt, that public display of forgiveness that should have felt wrong, should have triggered caution, but instead lulled her into believing she still controlled the narrative. And now, trapped between mounting legal threats and suffocating isolation, Lily began to understand the true cruelty of Phyllis's plan, because it wasn't designed for a quick kill. It was engineered for endurance, forcing Lily to live with every decision, every manipulation, every moral compromise she had justified in the name of power. Matt, racked with guilt and fear, tried to disappear into anonymity, but his face had become synonymous with betrayal, and every interview he gave, every document he surrendered, tightened the vice around Lily while eroding what little peace he had left, leaving him to question whether redemption was ever real or just another illusion Phyllis had sold him. And Phyllis herself, standing at the center of it all, felt the unsettling shift as the city recalibrated around her, some admiring her resilience, others fearing her capacity for destruction, because she had reminded everyone of a truth they preferred to forget, that love, loyalty, and forgiveness were weapons in the wrong hands. And as she finally came face to face with Lily one last time in a quiet corridor outside a legal office, no words were exchanged, just a long heavy look where regret, anger, and unspoken understanding collided. And Lily saw it then, the thing she had missed all along, that Phyllis hadn't done this because she was cruel, but because she refused to be broken again. And as they turned and walked in opposite directions, the city humming indifferently around them, the message lingered like a scar across Genoa City's soul. Power never truly belongs to those who seize it forcefully, but to those patient enough to wait, to smile, to embrace, and to let their enemies step willingly into the trap they built themselves.